I'm making the point that Gavin Newsom is losing this argument. How would I say that? Why would I deduce that? How would I come up with such a thing? Well, listen to the folks on CNN and what they highlighted with this chart. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, if we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket.
Did you hear that, Governor Newsom? Did you hear that? I know you're about to leave office soon. I get that. But did you just hear that? America is with Donald Trump. America is with the GOP on this issue.
Stephen A. Smith recently made comments that sparked a lot of discussion. His point adds to an already ongoing debate about California's economy, taxes, and the movement of some businesses out of the state. While supporters of Governor Newsom highlight long-term investments and policy goals, critics argue that rising costs and regulatory pressure are creating real challenges for the state. This raises a bigger question that's being discussed across media platforms. Is California's current direction sustainable in the long run, or is the state facing structural pressure that needs deeper reforms? Let's break down what's actually being said and why it's getting so much attention.
Gavin Newsom's talking about potentially running for the president. Actually, he's not talking about it. He's trying to avoid talking about it, but we all know what he's doing because he has to leave the gubernatorial seat in 2026, or the governor's seat in 2026. We know what he wants. You gonna pull it off with the record that took place in California all of these years under your stewardship? It's nice to see him sticking his chest out and going off. You think they don't have clips of how you embraced extreme leftist policies during the whole woke movement and cancel culture and everything else? You think they don't have those clips? You think they didn't see people getting arrested and let out of jail the same day?
Stephen A. Smith's comments have added fuel to an already ongoing political debate around Gavin Newsom's leadership style and policy direction. According to some critics, Newsom's progressive approach on issues like education reform and social policy reflects a strong ideological stance that doesn't always align with more moderate voters. Supporters argue that these policies are aimed at long-term structural change, while critics believe they have contributed to a growing disconnect between state leadership and everyday concerns such as housing costs, taxation, and infrastructure pressure. This is where the discussion becomes important politically, because the bigger question is not just ideology, but whether California's current governance model is effectively addressing the practical challenges faced by residents. And that debate is now extending beyond state politics into the national conversation.
You think they don't have footage of crime ravaging the streets of Los Angeles or homelessness? You think they don't know about the cost of living and how it's the highest in this republic right now? Let's talk. Let's talk.
As the discussion continues, Stephen A. Smith also highlighted broader issues that critics often associate with California's current challenges. Two of the most frequently cited concerns are homelessness and the rising cost of living. In cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, homelessness has become a highly visible social issue, with ongoing debate about how effectively local and state policies are addressing the situation. At the same time, California continues to rank among the most expensive states in the country, with high housing prices, taxes, and regulatory costs putting pressure on many middle-class residents and businesses. Supporters of state leadership argue that these are long-standing, complex issues influenced by population size, housing demand, and economic inequality. Critics, however, believe current policies have not gone far enough in providing effective relief. Taken together, these issues are now central to California's political debate and are shaping how voters evaluate leadership and future policy direction.
I don't pretend to know. I'm just an American citizen and a conscientious observer that's able to read and deduce what the hell is happening to some degree. I don't have all the answers, but damn it, the people who do, what good are you if all you're going to do is spew vitriol and alienate one side with 77 million voters that are going to look at him and embrace the victim or the victimhood that he's embracing? How do you serve to convince them to swing your way? Because somebody needs to. How are you going to convince people to go to the polls?
Another key argument raised in this broader discussion focuses on political polarization in California. Some commentators, including Stephen A. Smith, have pointed to what they describe as a growing difficulty in bipartisan engagement between Democrats and Republicans in the state. Critics argue that when political dialogue becomes limited, it can reduce the space for compromise and leave sections of the population feeling underrepresented. Supporters, however, maintain that California's political direction reflects the priorities of its electorate and that policy decisions are shaped through democratic processes. This tension between majority governance and minority political perspectives continues to shape debates around housing, taxation, and regulation in the state. And as these issues grow more complex, the question of political cooperation remains central to California's future policy direction.
On this particular issue, as it involves migrants, immigrants, those who are undocumented, dare we say illegal, in the United States of America, he's winning on this issue. There's a reason he won a popular vote. There's a reason he won the electoral college vote. There's a reason he won every swing state. There are people within the United States of America that want our immigration crisis addressed and want the situation resolved somehow, some way. And a person that seems eager to bring a resolution to the table is President Donald Trump.
Another major point in this broader debate centers around immigration policy in California and its relationship with federal cooperation. Some commentators, including Stephen A. Smith, have highlighted disagreements between state leadership and federal approaches as a key area of political tension. Critics argue that California's sanctuary-style policies and limits on certain forms of federal cooperation may create operational challenges in enforcement and resource management. Supporters, however, maintain that these policies are designed to protect community trust, public safety, and constitutional rights. At the same time, immigration remains a deeply complex issue that affects housing, education, labor markets, and public services across the state. These pressures are not new, but they continue to shape political debates about how best to balance enforcement, humanitarian concerns, and economic needs. As a result, immigration has become one of the most contested policy areas in California's political landscape, with strong opinions on all sides and no simple solutions in sight.
Because they may say, we had a bipartisan agreement when Joe Biden was in office that Donald Trump convinced the GOP to nix because he wanted to use it as an issue to favor him during the election. Well, damn it, it worked. It worked. And I got news for you, Governor Newsom. It's working now. But before I go any further to elaborate on this issue, let's hear from Donald Trump himself. Let's see how he feels about the state of California and what's been going on under Governor Newsom's regime.
Another major example often brought up in this discussion is California's high-speed rail project. Originally introduced as a flagship infrastructure initiative aimed at modernizing transportation in the state, it has faced significant challenges over the years. Critics point to long timelines, rising costs, and ongoing construction delays as signs of inefficiency and bureaucratic complexity. They argue that such large-scale public projects often struggle with planning, funding adjustments, and regulatory hurdles that slow progress significantly. Supporters, on the other hand, highlight that major infrastructure projects of this scale are inherently complex and often take longer and cost more than initially projected, especially in densely populated and highly regulated regions like California. As a result, the high-speed rail project has become a central talking point in debates about government efficiency, infrastructure planning, and long-term policy execution in the state.
Because based off of what Donald Trump said, I'm making the point that Gavin Newsom is losing this argument. How would I say that? Why would I deduce that? How would I come up with such a thing? Well, listen to the folks on CNN and what they highlighted with this chart. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, if we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket. Compare now versus 8 years ago during Trump's first term. Look at this. In his first term, Trump was way underwater at minus 21 points. But look at this. He's up over 20 points. Now in the aggregate, he is in positive territory at plus 1 point on his net approval rating. Some other polls even have it a little bit higher than that. There is no issue on which Trump is doing so much better than he was in his first term, more than the issue of immigration.
This is where the debate around immigration policy in California becomes even more politically charged. Stephen A. Smith, along with other commentators, has pointed to immigration as one of the most divisive issues shaping public opinion around state leadership. Critics of Governor Newsom's approach argue that California's sanctuary policies and limits on certain enforcement cooperation may create additional pressure on public services such as schools, housing, and local infrastructure. Supporters, however, maintain that these policies are designed to protect immigrant communities, ensure public safety through trust-based policing, and reflect broader humanitarian and constitutional principles. At the same time, immigration policy has also become a key national talking point, with different leaders promoting very different approaches to border security and enforcement. This contrast continues to influence how voters evaluate leadership at both state and national levels. Ultimately, this is not a simple issue with one clear outcome, but a complex policy debate that sits at the intersection of economics, security, and humanitarian concerns.
But there is a deep state, which is the bureaucratic class that justifies its existence by making up new rules, and that's my job. It's the vast network of regulators, administrators, inspectors, contract reviewers, project managers, fee assessors, special commissioners, zoning officers, and consultants whose jobs seem to be to make sure nothing ever happens and then charge you for it.
Bill Maher has also weighed in on a broader issue that often comes up in discussions about California governance: bureaucracy. According to his perspective, large-scale regulatory systems and administrative procedures can sometimes make it difficult for projects to move quickly from planning to execution. Critics of the current system argue that permitting processes, multi-agency approvals, and regulatory requirements can slow down infrastructure, housing, and public service projects, increasing both timeframes and costs. At the same time, supporters of these regulations emphasize that oversight, environmental review, and legal safeguards are necessary to ensure transparency, safety, and long-term accountability in public projects. This tension between efficiency and regulation remains one of the central debates in California's policy landscape, particularly when it comes to housing development, infrastructure, and climate-related initiatives.
Semaphore estimates that if the red tape could be cut in everything that's currently stuck in the renewable queue, the United States would be 80% zero carbon in 7 years. The enemy to clean air isn't just big oil, it's big permitting. It's not that America isn't able to get anything done. It's that we're not allowed to. Of course, there should be consideration of the environment on everything we build, but as so often happens on the left, they seem to have no ability to recognize when they've taken a concept way too far and are in fact hurting their own cause. America's become Gulliver, the giant that got tied down with 1,000 tiny ropes by Lilliputians, the horde of little people who do big damage.
Bill Maher also expands on his criticism by making an important distinction. He emphasizes that his argument is not against regulation, oversight, or documentation, which he acknowledges are necessary in any functioning system. Instead, his concern is with what he describes as excessive bureaucracy that can slow down implementation and project delivery. According to this viewpoint, some public projects can take significantly longer than expected due to multi-layered approval processes, repeated reviews, and administrative requirements. Critics of this system argue that such delays can affect housing development, infrastructure upgrades, and other public initiatives. At the same time, supporters of strong regulatory frameworks argue that these processes exist to ensure environmental protection, legal compliance, and long-term accountability, even if they slow down execution. This debate ultimately reflects a broader policy tension between speed of development and the need for oversight, which continues to shape discussions about governance and reform in California.
As Barack Obama once said, one of the biggest lessons he learned as president was there is no such thing as shovel-ready projects. Environmental impact statements used to be a few pages long. Now they're thousands of pages of legalistic nonsense and take an average of 4.5 years to complete, with thousands of bureaucrats filling out millions of paper forms that kill hundreds of forests to answer the question, is this good for the environment?
In conclusion, both Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher are contributing to a broader public debate about California's current challenges. From their perspectives, Issues such as housing affordability, homelessness, immigration policy, and regulatory complexity are key pressure points shaping the state's political and economic landscape. Critics of current leadership argue that these overlapping challenges point to deeper structural and policy-related difficulties that have built up over time. Supporters, however, emphasize that California remains a large and diverse economy where many of these issues are long-standing and influenced by national as well as global factors. At the center of this debate is a larger question about governance: how to balance economic growth, social policy, and regulatory oversight in a way that addresses both short-term pressures and long-term planning. Ultimately, California's future direction remains a contested topic, with strong arguments on all sides and ongoing political disagreement about the best path forward.